This is New Patreon Series 69B, the second part of my series on re-examining the Shroud of Turin. I'm going to update you on what the scientific studies have shown. Now, photography reveals a negative image. In 1898, the Shroud was allowed to be photographed for the very first time. And the photographs taken that day changed forever the way people viewed the Shroud. The face appeared on the relic as a smudgy and blurred image. But when the photographer developed his negative, he was astounded to see the image of the face of Jesus that we now associate with the Shroud. This is on the negative image. As an image on the cloth, it was just a blur, but as a photographic negative image, it was visible in graphic detail. Why? Because the image on the Shroud is itself like a photographic negative image. Many relics of saints are medieval fakes. There had been a thriving business in fraudulent finger bones and skulls for the reliquaries of medieval churches, and until recently, many scholars had assumed the Shroud was a medieval forgery. Today, however, nearly all scholars and scientists who have studied the relic conclude that it is the authentic burial shroud of Mar Yeshua, the Master Jesus. How could a medieval forger have created a negative image on a cloth? Complete results of shroud research are too lengthy to fully describe here, but a summary of some of the more important findings are listed in the next slides. So for updates on shroud research, you go to shroud.com. So here are findings on shroud research on the linen cloth. The cloth linen is made from materials native to Palestine and the ancient weave native to the period of Yeshua. This is the kind of weave that it was made from. The Shroud of Turin is a single length of linen cloth. It measures about 14 feet by 3.5 feet. The patches and the burn marks, which you can see up and down the shroud, resulted from a fire several centuries ago, which was repaired by nuns. The weave is a 3-hop, that's 3/1 herringbone twill. The weft thread passes over 3 warp threads under 1/3 and so forth for each run of the weft thread across the loom. The next weft is offset by 1 and the next forming a twill. After a few threads, the offset is reversed, forming a herringbone. The Prey Codex, or Hungarian Prey illuminated manuscript, is one of the most important historical shroud documents showing that the Shroud of Turin existed prior to the 1200s within the Byzantine Empire. Here we see a picture of people examining the shroud and considering it to be holy. There are crosses all over it and so on, even though they could not see the negative image on the shroud. Now, there are findings on the bloodstains and the wound patterns. The bloodstains match biblical accounts given of the torture and crucifixion, i.e. the crown of thorns, the spear wound on the side, the scourging on the back, etc. Here we have an illustration that shows where the blood is and where it is with respect to the body, and places where there were wounds where the blood leaked out, and all this other kind of detail. You can look at it in detail if you would like to. The bloodstains are visible from nail wounds to the wrists, not the hands, and that was something that was thought. It was thought a long time ago that Yeshua was nailed through his palms, but he wasn't. In fact, it's been shown that to nail a body from their palms would simply tear apart and the body would fall. The Romans knew that, so they put a nail in between the arm bones and the lower part of the arm in order to make the body stay up. So the blood stains are visible from nail wounds to the wrists, not the hands, which medical research has shown would be necessary to support the weight of the human body. And this contradicts what was assumed in all medieval iconography, that Jesus was nailed through the hands, which he was not. Blood patterns and shape of wounds on the back of the body image exactly match patterns which would be made by the archaeologically recovered Roman 1st century tri-tipped Roman whip, which was an instrument of torture. Blood and water from the heart cavity, whose drip paths show the exact positions the agonized body turned on the cross over several hours, and much more. This is all documented on the shroud. Also, his heart and lungs were pierced by a Roman spear, releasing both blood and water, which is the result of death by crucifixion, which is a form of suffocation that causes water to collect in the heart cavity. The wound near the side of the torso, near the fifth rib, matches a Roman lance. So the idea of both blood and water coming out was something that was described by in the Gospel of John. The blood tested on the weave of cloth was found to be human blood type AB. John 20:6-7 states that there was a second cloth, possibly a face cloth. This relic exists today. It's well documented and is kept at the Cathedral of St. John in Oviedo, Spain. It can be dated back to at least AD 614 in Jerusalem. Blood stain patterns are similar to those on the shroud. It matches where the blood stains are on the shroud itself on the head. The blood type of the face cloth is type AB, the same as on the shroud. So shroud research on the findings of the image of a human body can be summarized this way. The image was fixed onto the inside of the cloth only by some little understood radiant process, not by painting or any other known process. The image on the shroud is holographic, not flat. That is, it was made by radiant energy from a three-dimensional source rather than painted onto the linen. This little thing I put down here, the 1978 Shroud of Turin Research Project concluded the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin. No pigments, paints, or dyes have been found on the fibrils, and the shroud image is not the product of an artist. The image is like an X-ray in that it reveals internal structures of the body. Again, looking at this illustration, the blood stains present soaked through the blood stains present, soaked through the linen cloth and were plainly visible on the back side of the cloth, but the image of the human body was not visible on the back side, proving the image could not be a painting, as painting would have soaked through like the blood. And the image of the body clearly shows that the thumbs are folded as they would be from a major injury to the area of nerves around the wrist, as we can see in this illustration. Here are more findings. The stains which make up the image of the body are incredibly complex, i.e. one fiber is discolored while another adjacent fiber is not. The stains are often only the thickness of 1/10 of a human hair that cannot be painted on. The shroud was tested with special ultraviolet instruments and was determined that the body image was not made by scorching, by fire. A VP8 image analyzer used by NASA to interpret images from space was used to discriminate two-dimensional images from three. The photo of the shroud is from a three-dimensional image. This established that the image was formed while draped over a three-dimensional object. And as we can see from this illustration, it looks like it stands up because it's three-dimensional. By means of a complex series of tests involving spectroscopy and reflected light, X-ray fluorescence and ultraviolet rays, thermography, radiography, and so on, they confirmed the absolute absence of pigments and dyes on the shroud. All the evidence shows that the master's body was far more violently abused than the medieval paintings show, and yet the face is completely serene and majestic. This would not have been possible except for a true master. There are findings on flowers and pollen samples. There are several images of flowers on the shroud. Research has determined that the type of flowers present bloom in March or April, the time the crucifixion is said to have taken place in Jerusalem, in that geographical location. One of the identified plants on the shroud is known to exist only in Jerusalem. Botanical leaf and flower shadows from the mysterious radiant energy that made all the shroud imprints reveal funerary flowers native only to Jerusalem that were placed on the body by those that collected the body. Pollen samples show a predominance of specimens that grow only in Palestine, several only in Jerusalem. Using state-of-the-art technology which identifies exact pollen types, the type of pollen most present on the shroud, especially near the head of the image, is from the thistle native to Jerusalem. This was the crown of thorns that was crushed onto the master's head. 27 of the plants bloom in the springtime at the same time as the Jewish Passover, when Yeshua was crucified. So Zygophyllum dumosum has both pollen as well as an image on the shroud and grows only in Israel, Jordan, and the Sinai region. Gundella terniforti, most frequent of the pollens that are found by the scientists on the shroud, and is indicative of season, was the plant material found where the crown of thorns was imprinted around the head on the cloth. Some other research findings. Computer analysis compared the face imprinted on the shroud and some of the principal icons of Jesus' face dating back to the first millennium AD, work by Giovanni Tamburelli and Nello Ballosino in 1989 suggests it is very likely that the face of the man of the shroud was the prototype of Christian iconography, at least since the 6th century. This is the kind of iconography we see, showing the three tips of the beard and the owl-like eyes and so on. Images from coins struck in AD 695 appear nearly identical to the facial image on the shroud. The inscription on these coins translates as Jesus Christ, King of Kings. Certain caves near Jerusalem contain lots of rare types of limestone. On the underside of the shroud cloth, this rare type of limestone indigenous to the area outside of Jerusalem can be found. In 1978, Giovanni Tamburelli obtained three-dimensional high-definition images from the face of the shroud, highlighting details that would otherwise not be visible. These 91 details included particular traces over the right eyelid. These markings were left by an object identified as being a Roman coin, although there is some doubt now about whether that really was a coin. But coins were used in burial to hold the eyelids shut so that when rigor mortis set in, the eyes would not be frozen in the open position. Certain characters of the coin establish a mint date from the 1st century. So here are shroud images from the right eye. These are the coins that are indicated by these images. Now, there's also radioactive carbon isotope dating. In 1988, carbon dating tests concluded the Shroud was no more than 600 years old. But since that time, serious doubts have been raised about the accuracy of the carbon dating results. Recently, the evaluation of the data from all 4 labs found that there were significant differences among them in procedure and analysis that radically skewed the results, as published in Nature magazine in 1989. Most scholars feel that this anomaly, in the face of all other evidence for antiquity and authenticity, can be explained in one of 2 ways. The radiation that created the image on the cloth could have radically boosted the C14 percentages in the Shroud linen, which would make it appear younger. Over the centuries, the percentages would have been reduced by half-life to much higher than normal, creating the illusion that the Shroud is much more than 1,000 years younger than it really is. So, if we look at the radioactive carbon isotope dating revisions, we can take a look at this chart. The other scientific explanation for excess C14 is that the living mold and bacteria in the linen has kept the C14 percentages high through its processes of metabolizing carbon from the atmosphere. Normally, when a living piece of wood or cloth goes dead or is manufactured into something, it stops exchanging gases with the atmosphere, and the natural carbon-14 isotope count slowly decomposes away by half-lives, and that's how you can date an axe handle or some other kind of ancient artifact. But when living microorganisms growing in the linen remain alive, they keep the C14 percentages significantly high and totally skew the radiocarbon dating. In 1996, fibers from the Shroud were tested and found to have enough of this biocoating to significantly skew carbon dating results. The linen of the Shroud has been found to be encapsulated in microscopic mold and bacteria that the scientists who did the original radiocarbon dating did not know about and had no effective way to remove. And of course, the Vatican does not allow scientists to snip any more pieces off the Shroud to clean them and do it properly. In 2017, however, in response to a legal request, all raw data kept by the British Museum were made accessible. A statistical analysis of the Nature article and the raw data strongly suggests that homogeneity is lacking in the data and that the procedure should be reconsidered. Shroud scholars have petitioned the Vatican for newer and better organized tests. So far, it has not been granted.